Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is another Worcestershire church. This is another Frederick Preedy rebuild. There was one a few videos ago, I believe, but this is the church of St James, Bishampton, which may be pronounced Bisham. This is England after all. It's largely been rebuilt. I mean, everything you see behind me was rebuilt in 1869 to 70 under the direction of Frederick Preedy. Once again, we've got a west tower that is older, and that's been kept, and there's some evidence of the older building. It's a nice, light, airy building, a good space, shall we say. Although Preedy is well known as the only Victorian Gothic architect who made his own glass, the east window here is plain. So we'll have a look around and see what we can see. So as usual, we start at the west end here. We're in the tower because, of course, the tower is the oldest part of the building. It appears to be 15th century. But in front of us is the oldest thing in the building. This is the font, which is Norman. It's a nice Norman tub, which is that rope moulding around the bottom of the bowl. And then the bowl is curiously carved with various symbols. We've got a cross here. We've got this six-pointed star-ish thing. We have here this as flower. Here there's a sort of triskelion type thing. There's another six-pointed star, another cross, another flower, another star, another flower, another star, another flower, another flower, and back. So this is Norman, probably late 11th, early 12th centuries. There's always an overlap, of course, because it's not like everybody gets a memo saying, oh, we've got to start doing things differently now. Some older memorials can be found in the tower, not very readable. This one is 1799, James Clark. 1781, his wife, his widow Elizabeth, 1799, and so on. That one is not readable, but they're all similar sort of dates, late. Well, this is interesting because this is Colonel John Callow, late of the King's Own Dragoons, and Lieutenant Governor of Quebec, who died in 1810, aged 67. So he's interesting. And his sister married Mr. Clark. So former Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. And then we are in the Victorian nave. The pews at the back have been taken out to make for a more flexible space for refreshments and things, and so you've got this cupboard, and I suspect that there's a sink and things under there normally is. It's what essentially refreshments after the service are pretty much required these days, but back when Preedy designed the building, you didn't have them. You'd have maybe go to a village hall or to the rectory or something, or the vicarage. And here we have Henry Niven M.A., St John's College, Cambridge, vicar of the parish. It would be vicarage, 1850 to 1890. War memorial, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, Micah 4:3. And while we know that because of the sinfulness of man, war goes on, our ideal is not that war should go on. Our ideal must be peace. Here we have Millennium Tapestry. You can see one of the things there is this picture of a bomber from the Second World War, because there were air bases around here. The pulpit is one of these whacking great stone things. This is by Preedy. Frederick Preedy was also a sculptor. He was a very talented man, and he created the pulpit here. And absolutely, it is a great chunk of stone with a statue in the front, but it's a very confident thing, and of course, because the whole building is Preedy, then it makes some sense. We've got this wonderful brass lectern, obviously firmly fixed in place, as it should be, and again, that's from the Victorian church. So in the chancel, the furniture basically is Victorian. A nice organ here. It's rebuilt 1966. I suspect that it's a Nicholson, because most of them around here are Nicholson. because Nicholson is the Worcestershire organ builder. Now, I do not know whether there was originally stained glass in the window. I suspect there may have been, and I have my suspicions that there may have been an incident involving a bomb blowing in the windows, but I could be wrong. It's one of those windows that looks like it should have had stained glass in, but maybe there's never had anyone who gave the stained glass. Again, no reredos, it's very simple, just this, and then just this chunk of stone, although there's evidence it may have been painted one. In fact, I think it was painted, so the paint has been scrubbed off at some point. There is the credence shelf and a little chair for the bishop. Some of these places, they had to borrow a chair for the bishop from a local big house, but here we at least have a pair of chancel chairs. Choir stalls, again, original. Nice bit of carving here. You can see here you've got this screen that swings out. Isn't too intrusive anyway. Not when it's folded back. And there you can see at the west end, that is the tower arch. Very important. Very important. So it's a simple building, and as you can see, it's designed so lines of sight are very good. There's no columns getting in the way. The chancel arch is quite broad. You can see here there's not an awful lot at the side of the chancel arch, because there doesn't need to be, just enough room for the pulpit. Here is an interesting thing, though. This is a survival from the previous church. This is an hourglass. You may have heard of them being used in the 17th century by Puritans. They used basically to time the sermon. They're not always an hour long, some are longer, some are shorter, but traditionally hourglass. And the story is told of one insufferable preacher saying, "Look, we're all good fellows here, let's have another glass," at which point no doubt the congregation groaned. They'd been listening to him drone on for an hour already. Here we have St. James the Great, common to, certainly with these Preedy pulpits, quite often we'll find a figure of the patron saint of the church carved in the front. So that is the inside here, and it's very typically Preedy rebuild, very like, of course, that one we saw earlier at Crowell, which should be a good number of videos ago now. So that is the inside, and that's back to the font, and the local history display behind. And so this is the exterior of St. James, Bishampton. You can see here this nice, big, solid 15th century Worcestershire tower. It's quite typical of the area. The rest of the building, as I say, is Victorian. It's Frederick Preedy rebuilt. Now, why was it rebuilt? Sometimes, as at Crowell, part of the idea was, well, the old building is just inconvenient and a bit mean compared to the tower. Here, maybe the same thing. Maybe, I mean, certainly one of the things that did happen was that buildings could be neglected, and sometimes it was felt that it might be easier and better to just pull everything down and build from the ground up. I suspect that as at Crowell, the new church is on the foundations of the old, so the floor plan is the same, but it's almost certainly taller than the original, and to some extent it followed this sort of 14th century style architecture, although there is quite a lot of borrowing from other periods, and of course there's some reused material, including some windows. So we'll have a look around the outside and see what we can see in that respect. So of course it's the south side, and you can see here this nice tall west tower with those little windows show where the stairs go up to the belfry. A porch is typically Victorian. Interesting windows, you see you've got that little lancet type, and then you've got this big square-headed window, which does look like you've got this 17th century type one, and then someone has put some tracery in the top, and then these windows here which shrink down in size but are essentially 13th 14th century style. There's some gravestones, you can see these old gravestones, because they were often put in before the ground had settled. Very often they lean at an angle over in the direction of the grave. Modern times we've realised this can be a problem, and there are ways to avoid it, one of which is either you have a solid base, or you wait for the grave to settle and then you put the stone in perhaps a year or so after the burial. But in the 19th century, not so much, which lends a certain rustic charm, shall we say, to these rural graveyards where the gravestones are still in place. East End there, again, all very Victorian. The pinnacles have been renewed, of course. You notice they all have little weather vanes on them, but there's no wind today. It's a very calm and bright and beautiful day. We're on the edge of the village, and you can just look out over the fields there. There's an organ chamber and vestry on the north side of the chancel, where they normally are, and then the modern graveyard on the north side, because, as I've said before, north side for medieval churches is seen as unlucky. Well, it's seen as the unfavoured side, shall we say. Probably better than unlucky. Not that superstitious, but it's the unfavoured side. So burials don't take place there on the whole, unless they really can't help it. And again, we've got these windows, and it does look as though the lower part, well, it's obviously a different stone, and I suspect that's because he's reusing stuff. The doorway here, north doorway, is definitely a reuse. This is a Norman doorway. That tells us there's Norman work surviving until the rebuild, and that probably explains these arched windows. It's a Norman reference. Tower here, that's not the colour of the stone, that's lichen growing on the outside, which gives it this rather nice reddish tinge. Holly tree there isn't a west doorway, as we noticed, and we come all the way around the west end of the church and into this very rural graveyard. There is a big modern village, but it's all to the south of the church, and well, there's nothing to much to the north of the church, and the older part of the village is also to the south of the church. So that is the church here at Bishampton in Worcestershire. Now, that's St James's, Bishampton. It's a very good example of a Preedy rebuild where he's kept the tower. Towers, of course, are expensive. Towers are major pieces of work, and if your tower can be retained, then by all means do it. And it does seem here, as at Crowle, Preedy has gone, well, all the people, the clients at the church have gone to Preedy, well, we want a building that's more fitting, in our opinion, for that big tower that we've got, something a bit smarter than our rather rustic structure. And it's a shame these rustic buildings go, but they do. So that's St James, Bishampton. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.